atmosphere during my lifetime, I was born in 1959, and so I came up right during the civil rights movement in the 60s. And so by 1964, when I was about 5 years old, the Civil Rights Act was passed. Now, being a 5-year-old, I didn't know much about it, but then it certainly made a tremendous impact for me and my family, because all the things that my parents had endured and so many others had endured, the law says that I would not be required to endure that. And so growing up in Memphis, Tennessee, Memphis, even though it was called and is one of the major cities in the South, everything in the South and Memphis was segregated to the fact that you had certain neighborhoods that you would live in and certain neighborhoods that others would live in. And there was also an effort to ensure that those racial lines always stayed on one side or the other. Whenever someone needs your vote, they will then serve you. And if they do not need your vote, they will not serve you. So with the Voting Rights Act of 65, that meant that the mayors within the city, even though the city may have a larger population, but then everyone in a certain population group does not think the same way. So therefore, they would need to get someone to not be so far to what we call the right as opposed to the left, and someone who's going to be in the center to try to help all of the people. So growing up at that particular time in the civil rights movement is what I recall there, being a younger person there. I was also there in Memphis in 1968 when Dr. King was assassinated. I witnessed all of that and understood what the marches were about. The marching was about that the sanitation workers were asking for a decent wage and a living wage, and the city of Memphis, along with its mayor and the council people, were not doing that and were not trying to do that. And if you recall, all the signs of the protest of "I am a man," all of those things came about, and then the assassination of Dr. King, there being in Memphis, leads right up to what we're even seeing and understanding here in 2023. Growing up also with the civil rights movement, being able to witness not only the things that are going up with the 60s and the progress that African Americans have made, is going on to the election of Jimmy Carter in 1976. President Carter came in, and he also, as we recall, the Vietnam War was then winding down, and President Carter used the funding that had been going to the military to fund the Education Society within Memphis. Oh, and before going back, not wanting to overlook what Lyndon Baines Johnson did with the Civil Rights Act, and also with the continuation of a program and the start of a program called Head Start. This was where they were funneling money in to try to educate the African Americans. And so we then had an opportunity to go to school in the summer before our first grade year, and then to get prepared for the school system and for the school year. All those things were very beneficial, and those are the progress that we saw within education, because education is and continues to be the main key for being raised out of poverty, for the main key to to get the equality that we so richly ask for, and that this nation and that we demand from our nation, which is just an equal opportunity, and the education will be the method to get that opportunity. And lower middle class and poor children to be able to go to college with a grant, and therefore being able to lift them out of lift us out of just a high school only education, and allowed us to be able to go and further our education. And by furthering our education, we then were able to have access to the particular jobs that have been denied from us. And yes, there were people who would decry and say that we were part of a quota system, but that is not true. All we ever asked for was an opportunity. And because by getting hired, and your work ethic and how you perform on your job will determine whether you stay in a job. Okay? And so, and again, those are things that President Carter did all the way through his administration, and then we understand the things that occurred after the election of 1980, to how some of the presidential candidates came in and said certain things and wound up taking over, and with Republicans trying to do a trickle down economic plan that, well, a rising tide raises all boats, and we understand and we know that that type of economics does not and has not worked. But that is what my life was like during the civil rights movement. I had the opportunity to think about that, and my civil rights hero is the publisher of Jet Magazine and Ebony Magazine. My reason for Mr. John H. Johnson being my civil rights hero is because when he started these magazine, Jet, as a weekly magazine, to give the nation and to give Black people the opportunity to see things about us. And it started in 1942. Black people were never positive, or very rarely positively portrayed in any kind of magazines, be it newspaper, be it other magazines, and especially onto the medium of television, or even at that time radio. We were always put into what seemingly was a buffoon-ish type of atmosphere. But what Mr. Johnson did was to show the positiveness of Black people. And he also wanted to put the news out there of what we as Black people were experiencing and to share what was going on. By Jet Magazine being published and getting out there, we then had the opportunity to see just what was going on, not only in our neighborhoods, but all around the nation. And then we were able to understand what the plight was for many in different areas. You know, that is the key to for us, is using the media. Whereas when we know and understand what's going on in one location, then we can perhaps see a pattern and start to make changes or demand changes to that particular pattern. Publishing of Jet Magazine and Ebony Magazine, it was headquartered in Chicago, Illinois, there on what is known as Michigan Avenue, which is the $1 Million Mile. But his offices and all of that publication, and when we think about that, it was a privately held company. Privately held meaning that it is his company, and he managed it, and he oversaw all of the distributions to ensure that everything would go out, you know, and not being held accountable. And what I mean by held accountable, not having to bow down to what the stockholders would say. He would do the things that were required for Black people to understand and to know what was going on. And then we would go out and then we would purchase his magazine. Many times growing up throughout my lifetime, the Jet Magazine would be there on the newsstands. And those of us who would then go and become subscribers to the magazines, we then will receive the magazines all the time through the mail, until we would then know and understand and would be able to have our magazine and to support the Jet and Ebony Magazine through the Johnson Publishing Company. So with the positiveness of what he was able to demonstrate and to share and to put the word out to everyone, and to Black people and white people, who would then look and see and understand what the plight is of going on within the African American community, that is why I selected Mr. Johnson, John H. Johnson, as my civil rights hero. Because when you go and look at all the things that he did by documenting the things, what were written down, documenting the things of Dr. King, documenting the things that went on with the Watts riot, and documenting all the positive things, be it within the arena of sports, whereas Jackie Robinson breaking the color line, also with the football players, and then with one baseball player that many people do not remember or talk about. The man's name is Curt Flood. Curt Flood was an all-star center fielder for the St. Louis Cardinals, but he is the one who said that, why should I be document or relegated to only being able to sign with the St. Louis Cardinals when my contract is over. I demand to be able to take my services and talents anywhere. And Curt Flood is the person that started what is now known as free agency, because before then, the owners had all the power and the players had none. He gave up his career because once he won his legal battle in the court system, he was no team would hire him, and so he lost his career. But all of the people throughout all of the particular sports, be it basketball, football, baseball, hockey, all of them owe the opportunity for free agency to Curt Flood. And so again, Johnson Publishing is my civil rights hero.